Hello, good afternoon, and you're very welcome to Liveline. Mary, good afternoon to you. How are you?
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I always bridle when people are down to earth or whatever, because I've no great sense.
As the First World War drew to a close, nature created a lethal virus, the killer flu of 1918. The outbreak would claim more lives than the Great War itself. An estimated 50 million people died worldwide and more than 20,000 in Ireland alone. Yet it is the forgotten tragedy of Irish history. The early 20th century was a time of great upheaval in Ireland. Young Irish men were being slaughtered in the trenches of the First World War. At home, painful political divisions emerged as old orders were challenged. Rebellion moved inexorably towards independence. Against this backdrop, a deadly virus arrived on Irish shores. Only a few are old enough to remember. These are the stories of 3 lives touched by the killer flu outbreak of 1918.
This is my class. She wouldn't be in that class.
No, but this was the cookery class.
Yes. This is me here.
It is. Very good.
Nellie O'Toole was 10 in 1918. She's now 101 years old. Nellie grew up in a large family in the village of Rathvilly, County Carlow. In later years, she took up a career as a nursing assistant. For a long time, she acted as nanny to Georgina Kelly, who had lost her own mother early. Nellie recalls her school days in Rathvilly with pleasure.
They were very happy days. Oh, we all liked school. We had everything we wanted there. We had drill. We learned to cook there, do cooking and sewing. We made samples with different coloured threads. Miss Finnegan was very, very tough, very strict. She'd have the ruler there to give you a good slap of it there if you weren't doing what you should do.
Many of Rathvilly's inhabitants worked on the big farms and estates that surrounded the village. The adult males in Nellie's life were cobblers, blacksmiths and workers for hire, Nellie's father included.
Well, my father was just an ordinary working man. The men, they all worked for the farmers. Hay and straw and all this kind of thing.
The nearby big house, Lisnavagh, was the largest local employer. It was then an estate of nearly 5,000 acres. Lord Rathdonnell of Lisnavagh was a benefactor to the village of Rathvilly. He built the cottages where Nellie's extended family lived.
13 cottages. And we were at number 11. That was all his land that those cottages were built on.
Horse racing enthusiast Tommy Christian was 5 in 1918. He's now 95. Tommy enjoys visiting his famous next-door neighbour in the Pat Taff stables.
Hey, Dad. That chicken king.
It is, yeah.
Tommy has always lived in Ardclough, County Kildare. The nearby Grand Canal is now a quiet amenity. Once, it was a vital transport link between the Shannon and Dublin, with up to 90 barges passing each day.
Oh, the barges, they were great. They went all night and all day, all through the night. There was motorboats and horse-drawn boats carrying provisions to and from Dublin, turf boats, wheat and all that into the city. And on the return journey, they brought back barrels of beer. There were some great singers on them boats, would you believe it? The water used to carry the voice, you know, further. You hear them singing at 12 o'clock at night, not a bother on them.
Tommy's father was a cobbler. It was a small household with only 2 children, Tommy and his sister. Both adored their mother.
She was a big, tall woman, black-haired woman. Erect. Not bad looking.
Robert Mcdowell is retired from his job of Professor of History at Trinity College Dublin. He too was 5 in 1918 and was living with his family in Belfast. His father was a tea merchant in what was a thriving city.
Belfast also prided itself on being a very go-ahead place. It hadn't got the historic charms of Dublin, but it was very good on the modern aspects. We were within walking distance of the city centre. That was very exhilarating. In 10 minutes, you were surrounded by interesting shops and traffic.
Although very young, Robert Mcdowell understood that momentous events were taking place in the world beyond his home.
Even for a child of 5, the war loomed as a mysterious, rather frightening phenomenon in the background. I remember vividly the number of people in uniform, people coming to the house.
The war was making headlines across Ireland. At 10 years of age, Nellie O'Toole was hearing about the tragedies of war from her mother.
She was a wonderful reader. In the summertime, she had her little stool that she'd bring out outside the door. The others would be asking what happened and what to do, and you know, she'd have to explain to them. She was always talking about the war, the awful war and all. That'd be all in the paper, she'd read all that for them, and they'd be all praying that it'd be over soon, you know that, the way they are.
But the war would soon introduce a new killer. The deadly virus could have been brewing as early as 1916 in the vast army camps of Europe. But a mystery killer disease was first recorded in March of 1918. 50 American soldiers died of the disease in Kansas. The event didn't attract much publicity in a war-torn world. In May, an outbreak of flu in neutral Spain was widely reported. The name Spanish flu stuck despite not having originated in that country. There were deaths. The outbreak flared, then seemed to disappear. But in early September 1918, the flu reappeared in America, and this time it was much more virulent. The virus exploded in army camps near Boston. It raced across the cities of North America. 4,500 people died in Philadelphia in 1 week. Alaskan villages were wiped out. Almost simultaneously, the flu bloomed across war-ravaged Europe. It arrived in Irish ports in October and began to spread inland.
Oh yeah, once it got into bottling glass and around, you'd hear it, you know. Somebody would come in and tell you, did you hear about the flu coming? And that. And they'd be all saying, oh, sure, it won't come here. It won't come here. But it did.
The flu epidemic spread along main lines of transport. Trains returned battle-hardened troops to barracks around the country. Rathvilly was on the Great Southern Railway. Travelling from flu-infected Dublin, its carriages passed through Baltinglass and Rathvilly on its way to Tullow.
Sure, everyone had the flu then. Everyone was sick with the flu. They were all laid up. A deserted village. There was nobody, no doors open in Fairland Street, anywhere. Oh, I think the school was closed. Yes, the school was closed.
The Rathvilly School rollbook bears out Nellie's memory. A circle marks an absent child. The reason for closure is clearly marked. With so many sick, schools and workplaces across Ireland were unable to function. In Belfast, the factories and army barracks were a breeding ground for the flu virus. Perhaps not fully aware of the risk, Robert Mcdowell's family paid a visit to a hospital.
I distributed magazines and newspapers to soldiers in hospital, handed them to people lying in bed.
The influenza virus invaded the Mcdowell household.
And my memory of still 90 years afterward is very vivid. I remember lying back in a large armchair, and my parents and the local GP gazing at me in a very worried way. I just felt awed. I had fever, I think, but didn't know what it was. Well, after that, my memory goes.
The influenza epidemic circled the globe. In Ireland, it spread from the east towards the west coast. County Kildare, a hub of rail and canal transport, had the highest death rates in 1918. Naas was particularly badly affected. Not far from Naas, the flu had reached Ardclough. Tommy Christian's family was in danger.
The flu came all of a sudden, no warning. There was me and my sister, father and mother, we were all stricken with it. Dreadful headache, but that was the first symptoms of it. There was no relief for headaches that time. Then the throat come at you. It was unforgettable, your sore throat. We couldn't swallow any food for about 3 weeks. We were on liquids, gruel and bovril and such things. And regarding sleep at night, you couldn't sleep. Turning and twisting all night. Oh, imagine dying all night, no sleep, for 3 weeks. Can you imagine that?
In Rathvilly, County Carlow, Nellie O'Toole's family were also hit.
My brother was very ill with it. He was very, very bad. Beating his head against the wall, he was. Very bad. The doctor gave them whatever he could, I suppose, at that time.
Remedies were ineffective in treating the deadly strain of influenza. Local doctors and nurses were overwhelmed.
Well, there was only the one doctor, he was trying to do the whole lot. He was working around the round of the clock. There was no tablets or pills that were unheard of. We were lying on poultices. My aunt used to make his long cloth bandage, like linseed, they called it. As hot as you could bear them, you know. Fry the neck off you. But you were supposed to put up with it if you wanted to get cured.
In 1918, doctors were unaware that influenza was caused by a virus. It was not until the 1930s that viruses were discovered. Face masks could not guard against such a virulent enemy. Tommy Christian's family were incapacitated by the flu. Dehydration or starvation were a real threat.
Your next door neighbour was a mile away. The houses was that scarce. No water of any sort. Only what we went down, way down the fields to a well. We weren't able to get to the well for water, spring water. Lucky I had an aunt living near hand. She used to look after us when we weren't able to get out of bed, you know. Only for that we were in a bad way.
In Belfast, Robert Mcdowell's family also needed assistance.
The whole household, in fact, was gripped by the flu epidemic. My parents were down. My small brother was ill. His nurse, we now call her a nanny, his nurse died, and the only person in the household who remained on her feet was the general maid, a sturdy country girl who really was apparently magnificent in the crisis. Now the doctor, luckily, was able to get 2 nurses for us. It was lucky for me we had good nursing, for I managed to survive not only flu, but double pneumonia, which was the worst consequence of flu you could have.
More than 800,000 fell ill from flu on this island. With too few medical personnel, there were calls to release Sinn Féin doctors interned in British jails. The inhabitants of Rathvilly were unable to fend for themselves and needed help from the local big house at Lisnavagh.
When they knew that the people were all laid up with flu, it was up to Lady O'Toole, Lord and Lady O'Toole, to deliver soup to the people. Milk cartons came down every morning from Lisnavagh. 2 milk cartons full of soup, hot soup, and that was delivered to the village. I didn't get the flu. I was very lucky. I was up and around, and I used to help the man when he'd come down with the soup.
The soup from Lisnavagh proved to be a lifesaver.
Oh, sure, they would have died. Sure, it cured them, really. I mean, what would they drink unless a cup of tea, you know? And I mean, they weren't able to make it or anything for themselves much.
2.5% of those who caught the virus would die. Someone only had to breathe in the virus to catch the disease. Unlike ordinary flu, the virus claimed the strong and young. It could provoke an overreaction of the immune system, hemorrhaging the lungs and suffocating its victim. A person could be healthy in the morning and dead by evening.
A friend of mine, a good deal older than myself, told me how he had come into Trinity to see his tutor in November 1918, and they saw, he and the tutor saw, an undergraduate sitting on the examination hall steps, collapsed. He'd been suddenly struck by flu, so they picked him up. The tutor knew what to do, carried him to a house in Botany Bay, where a number of undergraduates were lying on the floor, all victims of flu, waiting for an ambulance to collect them.
The supply of coffins ran out. Bodies were queued up for burial. In Glasnevin Cemetery, nearly 350 were buried in 1 week in October, 4 times the average weekly number. In Selbridge, near Tommy Christian's home, a shopkeeper, father and son died on the same day. Their cousin died in Naas, as well as his 2 sisters in Belgium and Canada. Those lucky to survive were left severely weakened.
You know what you'd be in bed after 3 weeks? They weren't able to stand up. Weaknesses. We were months trying to get back to normal.
Robert Mcdowell's recovery coincided with a major world event.
I remember very vividly being lifted out of bed, taken to the window, looking at the house opposite where a large Union Jack was flying, and the nurse saying, "We won." That, of course, fixes the date, the 11th of November 1918, when I began to recover.
With the war over, there was general jubilation and relief. Irish regiments were returning home.
Oh, people cheered and they were delighted it was over, that there was no more war, you know.
But as the First World War ended, the killer flu was still claiming lives.
One of the most depressing things was hearing of people who survived the war but died in the flu epidemic.
By the end of 1918, the second most destructive wave of influenza had subsided. But in spring of 1919, a third outbreak swept the world. The Dublin area was again badly affected, but this time the outbreak reached the remote west. Donegal and Mayo suffered badly. Survivors gained immunity through exposure to the disease. The virus eventually had nowhere to go, no one to infect. A staggering 50 million had died. No war, famine or infection has ever killed so many in so short a time. The social and personal legacy was long-lasting.
She has affected me for years. Having had double pneumonia, you had to go cautiously. And I didn't go to school till I was 11.
More than 20,000 people died in Ireland during the influenza pandemic of 1918. For many Irish families, life changed irrevocably.
Well, my mother died a year after, when it was attributed to the flu. She never come from under the flu anyway. It was put down to that. Oh, indeed I did, of course, I missed her. There's no one like our mother, of course. She was a mother, real mother, yeah. Took us a long time to get over it. Me and the sister, my aunt took me. She only lived 100 yards away from me. My sister was sent to her relatives way over in Tain. Lucky enough, aunt was as good as a mother. The best in the world.
Tommy Christian's life continued to be entwined with County Kildare's Grand Canal. He married the local lockkeeper's daughter, and together they raised a family. Although the flu outbreak of 1918 caused many personal tragedies, it was overshadowed by public events. Memories of the flu pandemic remained in the private sphere, and official histories largely ignored it.
The majority of people at the present time, they don't realise how bad the flu was, you know. It was never fully brought home to them or explained to them what the flu was. I don't know why you never forget it.
But survivors often found the episode too grim to recall.
They never spoke about it. Didn't want to hear the word black flu ever again. They were afraid of the black flu returning. They lived in dread of it after going through such torture.
Recent events have reawakened interest in the killer flu of 1918. Only the oldest in our society still remember this forgotten tragedy of Irish history. Today, a new and deadly flu virus hatched anywhere in the world could arrive on our doorstep within hours. A swine or bird flu can, with just a few genetic mutations, become a killer virus that seeks out the young and strong. A global flu pandemic is an ever-present threat. Understanding the last great influenza pandemic is of renewed importance. Nellie O'Toole survived the 1918 flu outbreak. At 101, she still holds on to a strong belief in life.
Oh yes, be happy. That's the way to be. Happy, no use in being sad. Because that'll get you nowhere.